So my name is Scott Daniska, and I have experience both as a patient and a researcher. I've conducted research through academia, industry, and government programs, as well as seen hundreds of doctors as a patient and spoken to thousands of other patients over the course of 8 years. And in my experience, the patients have known more about these illnesses than the doctors that treat them. So doctors rarely ever read new publication, and they've become a barrier to medical access. Research coordination with patients is absolutely critical if we're to get anywhere in terms of improving quality of life. We have researchers so lost that they're researching conditions such as ME/CFS, fibromyalgia, and multiple chemical sensitivity as if they're psychological diseases. But all you need to do is talk to any of these patients out there that have these conditions, and you'll find out very quickly they're not. We cannot afford to fund research that does not have a consistent focus on improving patient quality of life anymore. In academia, that's frequently the case to learn for the sake of learning. However, 60% of our adult population has at least one chronic illness, and we're near the breaking point of society and our economy. If we don't prioritize novel treatment development and patient outcomes, our situation will soon become catastrophic as chronic illness cases continue to rise. Advocacy groups are not an ideal form of communication. They're the middleman and often work collectively for the vision of only one or a couple of people. To get the best representation, you need to speak to a variety of patients directly. I propose that there are two types of patients that work with researchers, one being a lay group that represents the patient population as a whole, and the other being patients with a technical background or understanding for grant reviewing. So I propose that feedback for the community. We also have something like a live chat, such as Discord or Slack, where patients can post articles, theories, and photos to researchers for crowdsourcing ideas, better understanding symptoms, and having a direct line of communication with researchers, rather trying to bombard research offices and every LinkedIn profile and email address they can find on the internet. Additionally, there must be a strategy for including severe patient population. Without that, researchers aren't aware of how serious these conditions are, and you end up with NIH researchers like Dr. Nath, who made a comment that ME/CFS patients aren't so severe. Research results of screening tests should be made available to patients. Clinical trials typically withhold this information. However, this should be presented to the patient after the study has concluded. These patients sacrifice a tremendous amount of time, energy, and literally blood to provide these samples, and they need this information to understand their own body chemistry in a way that doesn't rack up more medical bills for people who have no income. The consumer reviewer program run by the Department of Defense is great. I made a dramatic impact in my experience with the rest of the review board, and this program should be expanded to all of NIH. However, we need to limit participation to patients with some degree of scientific literacy in order to get the most out of informative responses. One of the consumer reviewers I work with didn't have a technical background, so he couldn't speak on the topic being reviewed. And I just want to say, lastly, patients are so desperate for answers, many would rather die than live with a chronic illness. So to that end, I know of an internet group composed of many people with chronic illnesses that are interested in the science of it and trialing experimental treatments. They pool their money together, sometimes north of $100,000 per order, and have experimental drugs that you've never even heard of manufactured in China, repackaged in supplement bottles, and distributed to members across the U.S. Patients will not wait for answers to come, and some of the clinical trials I've seen lately, including a fiber supplement and adjustment of sleep cycles, isn't going to cut it. Patients have a wealth of information that could vastly accelerate the pace of research, and our researchers need to hear it. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you very much for joining us, Scott. We appreciate those comments.